106.5 FM, K293CF, Moreno Valley.
10:50 a.m. across Southern California. If you miss us live, you can always catch us on Amazon Fire, Roku, or the Android on the Building Solid Foundations app. That is a free application for you. It's available everywhere. If you catch it, you guys catch us on the podcast platforms as well, if you like. We're out there too. We are also in the KCAA radio archives. Today, we're going to be talking with a real estate specialist, an attorney out of the UK. Now, most of you know, I work in the real estate development side here in the United States, in multiple states. And what Karen does is she is a specialist that helps people do what we do, but do it in the United Kingdom, where things are a little bit different. So Karen, welcome to Building Solid Foundation. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you, Steve. It's a pleasure to be here.
And Karen is someone we met about 6 to 8 months ago here in the U.S. when she was visiting in San Diego. She's a friend of a friend, and we hit it off very well. And then when we were in London back in December, Karen treated us to true British afternoon tea at one of the best places in London, and it was one of the thrills of visiting there. I used to do tea with my daughters when they were little and they enjoyed it in a fancy hotel. There's nothing like doing it in England in a place that is true English tea. And it was very high class. So I appreciated that. And it was a great experience. And I recommend anybody do that if you go over there.
Yeah. And especially because it was your first time to London. So it just had to be done.
It absolutely had to be done. That is a very British thing to do, and I've always looked forward to doing that. And this was Fortnum and Mason, and one of the best places in London to do that. So let's get into what Karen does. First of all, she advises clients to help them get development consent from local councils, which would be the UK version of the city or the county here in the US. And she helps clients that are involved in litigation related to that. So first of all, we're going to get into have you tell us more about what you do. But first, let's kind of define the difference between England, Great Britain, and the United Kingdom. Because here in the U.S., we look at it as one and the same, and we use those terms interchangeably, but they are definitions for three very different things over there.
Yeah, I mean, there's England is a part of Great Britain and a part of United Kingdom. I mean, it really there's not that much in the detail. There tend to be the political terms, but Great Britain is considered to be England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, and the United Kingdom. Sorry, Great Britain doesn't include Northern Ireland, but the UK does include Northern Ireland. So they are political terms, and there's not that much difference in them. I think people all over the world probably read more into it than we Brits do in the UK.
Yeah, and it's just again, we use the terms interchangeably if it's all the one and the same. But if you're up in Scotland and you say you're in England, that might be fighting words. So you have to be cautious, I think, when you do that.
Yeah. Don't ever make that mistake. And even in Wales, you're in Wales, you're not in England.
That's right. So England. So we think about if England was a state and Wales was a state and Scotland was a state, and together they create what would be the larger area of Great Britain, which is all on the one big island. And then when you add Northern Ireland in, which is the adjacent island, now you have the United Kingdom. So that's the way I would look at it. And it's interesting for us to view that. Of course, here in the U.S., there's 50 technically sovereign states that are all under one umbrella under the United States, and each of the states has their own separate government, even though there's a federal government over the top. So it's a different structure, the way things work. So let's get in. Karen, tell us a little bit more about what you do over in the United Kingdom. How do you serve your clients?
So I work with a team of real estate lawyers, and my colleagues will be involved in buying, selling, leasing land, and I work alongside them, and I specialize in an area called planning law, which essentially looks at the development process. So I will help clients secure planning permission from the local council, so development consents from, I think you call it the municipality or the city. We call them the council, and sometimes as part of that process, the developer needs to enter into legal agreements to make sure that they provide certain community benefits or to mitigate the impacts of their development. I also help people who are in trouble with the planning system because they've carried out works that don't have planning permission, and now the local council are looking to take action against them. And I also help opposition groups as well. So I can work for local communities who are concerned about the impacts that a new development is going to have in their locality. They might feel that it's not in the right place, or its design is unacceptable. So it's a wide variety of things, and all sorts of developments, whether it includes heritage buildings as well.
So you actually have separate courts for planning issues, is that correct?
That's right. So if you wanted to challenge the council's decision to grant planning permission, you'd go to the High Court. If you were to bring, it's called a judicial review. So it's where you're arguing that a decision that's made by a public authority is unlawful. And we do have a specialist planning court within the High Court, and that's just because there is quite a lot of litigation when it comes to planning. So I'm always having to keep up to date with new cases and case law that's coming out through the planning court, and that's just to make sure that you've got the right judges with the right expertise with planning law making these decisions.
So there's a lot of litigation here in the U.S. regarding planning, but we don't have separate courts. They go through just the regular court system that all hears every kind of civil case. So it's interesting to me they have a separate court for it. Now, also, I think another difference, there are violations. If you violate your planning rules, or what fail to go to the council and get approval for things there, it could be, I would say, some civil violation which may cause fines or penalties, but also you could be guilty of a criminal act. Is that correct?
It depends on what you're doing. So if you're carrying out work that needed planning permission without planning permission, then it's not automatically a criminal offence. The automatic criminal offences apply to listed buildings or heritage buildings. But if you were to do works without planning permission, then the local council could be serving you with an enforcement notice that says, take it down, or do this to it to make it smaller. Most councils will come and talk to you first and say, look, you should have got planning permission for this. Can you now apply for planning permission? But if you've got someone who's not cooperative, then yeah, they can serve you with an enforcement notice as a last resort. There is a right of appeal, but if that appeal doesn't succeed and the notice is upheld, then you really do need to comply with it, and that's when the criminal offence kicks in.
It's interesting. So here in the U.S., it's hard for me to think of a case where you would be guilty of a criminal act for a planning issue, except I think if potentially you were destroying sensitive habitat or open space, designated area, even if you owned it, then that might be a criminal act, destroying vegetation and animal life. But other than that, I think historic buildings here, it would be a civil issue. It'd probably be heavy fines. But I don't know that would be a criminal jail time type thing. And I think it's just different how different countries interpret that and how they choose to deal with enforcing it. So, but there again, I think the UK has a much richer and deeper and robust history than the United States, which is probably why that carries such a heavy weight. And the architecture and the culture
and I think
of
also,
the cities.
I think also, maybe I've always thought the criminal offences are probably more appropriate where the damage has been done, whether it's to a listed building or whether it's to wildlife. We do have wildlife offences here that are criminal offences. So I guess it reflects this, the punishment fits the crime. That's what they say.
Right. Now, you do have environmental regulations over there as part of this. Is that correct? So what kind of issues are under the environmental aspect?
Well, I'm not a specialist environmental lawyer, but certainly I work with someone who is. There is some overlap with what I do in the under the planning system. So we have to include environmental impact assessments for some planning applications, which will consider the environmental impacts of the scheme and how you're going to mitigate that. But certainly environmental regulations, I am no expert in, but I know that they are extremely wide. I mean, they cover wildlife, they cover protection of habitat, protection of rivers and watercourses, and contaminated land is another regime that's also quite complicated. So in fact, I think there's more environmental laws than there are planning laws. So I think I picked the right part of the area there.
Yes. Yeah, and that's true. Here in the U.S., we have to do one of the first things we do on a property is do what's called an environmental site assessment. We have to bring an environmental engineer out to review everything related to the current environment of that site and then the potential impacts of any development on that site on those environmental issues. And it is what we kind of think of as plants and animals and those type of things, but it also includes cultural issues, historical issues, traffic, noise, impacts on local schools, everything that affects the environment, the living environment currently, and the biodiversity environment on the site as it is. So with that, we're going to have to take a break. When we come back, we'll get a little deeper into what Karen does. We're talking with Karen Foles. She is in the United Kingdom as a development attorney. She also is in New York. She has a bar approval in the state of New York as well. We will get back to you right after this break on building solid foundations on KCAA.
FireUp Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. FireUp Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. FireUp Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Real Men of Real Estate.
Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA.
Boats, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station, KCAAradio.com.
You can find us on your dial at 102.3 FM, 1050 AM, as well as 106.5 FM.
This is Steve Matley. Join me every Thursday at 3 p.m. right here on KCAA for Building Solid Foundations radio talk show. I spent decades as a professional construction manager, business owner, real estate developer, and a college educator, and I enjoy learning new things from other people. We talk a lot about real estate, business, and finance, but we cover a diverse range of other topics as well. Some of the topics we've discussed in the past few months include real estate investing, leadership, higher education, ADUs, marketing using technology, multifamily rental properties, business strategy, entrepreneurship. You never know who may show up or what they may talk about, so join us right here on KCAA for Building Solid Foundations Radio.
Hi, this is Jim McLaughlin with Effective Action Consulting, and I've been a member of FireUp Connect for, probably 3 years now, and what I really like about FireUp Connect is the unique model that we go through, that we follow, the agenda, so to speak, in the meeting that really has us get engaged and involved with each other in the meetings. It's not that we're individuals, it's that we're all really working together to better ourselves, our businesses, and the community through the projects that we work on. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to network with people in this environment, and it's really impacted my business in a big way. So take a look.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are talking with Karen Foles. She is a real estate attorney based in the UK. We've been talking in the first segment about some of the differences between the US and the UK. And in that spirit, Karen, I wanted to ask you, when you're building in the UK, whether it's residential or commercial, you need to mitigate the impacts of your development. Can you talk to us about what the impacts are and how they become problematic and what the mitigation measures might be?
Okay, I mean, it really varies. I mean, if I was to take an example of, let's say you're building 400 homes and some offices, you need to think about how that affects the infrastructure in the locality. So if you're building 400 homes, it's highly likely that there will be families coming to live there, and those families have children. And if the local schools are already under some strain, they may need to be expanded. You might need a new school. So you would be looking to pay a specific sum of money, an education contribution, for certain types of dwellings. So maybe for 3 or 4 bedroom dwellings where you're likely to have children living there. The developer would need to pay the education contribution. So it's the developer that would make that payment, not the people who move into the house when they buy it. Other examples might be you have to upgrade the local roads. If there's a crossroads or a junction that's already, again, feeling the strain of traffic and now has to cope with even more traffic, you might have to make improvements, widen the road and what have you. There's also a move towards making it a nice place to live, for example. So for the people who are living there, you might need public open space that's provided on site. So you have nice landscaping and public open space provision. For the offices, you probably need to enter into travel plans that are approved by the local council, which encourage people to car share and to sort of minimize the impact of traffic that way as well. And that there's now a move to, there's some legislation that's coming into force, although people are already complying with this in any event, which is biodiversity. So if by developing that site, it loses a certain amount of biodiversity, you're going to have to re-provide it and with an uplift of 10%. If you can't do it on site, you're going to have to do it elsewhere. So it's all about thinking about, how is my development going to affect the local environment, and what can I do to try and fix that? And there's always a bit of back and forth between the developer and the council, negotiating what's reasonable and what's related to the development, and what's unreasonable, because sometimes you will have the council ask you for items that aren't related to the development and don't really mitigate the impact of your development. So you have to be careful, because there are tests in place, there's legislation. If you get it wrong, you could end up in court afterwards. So you want to do that quite carefully.
Okay, so there's some similarities with what happens over here. The difference, I think, is it may be a little more uniform across England and Wales between jurisdictions, or is it vastly different in different boroughs and counties?
It can vary. I mean, in the UK, each council will have their own set of planning policies that you need to look at when you're putting your planning application. So that they will have their own individual requirements. It's not, I mean, in terms of affordable housing, it's roughly about 30% of the housing that you're providing should be affordable, and that's fairly uniform across the local councils. But you would have a planning consultant employed to look at these policies and to advise you before you put your application in. So if one council has a very specific policy where you can see actually the education contribution is going to be much higher than another council, then that's going to have an impact on profit and the price that you're willing to pay for the land. So it's similar but different is probably a good way of describing it.
Okay. So there's a lot of similarities there. For example, for what my company does here in the US, we work in 4 different states, and those states are very different in how they operate. The most different of all of them is California. California has what they call CEQA, which is California Environmental Quality Act, which is very stringent. It's very difficult to get those hoops. And it does address a lot of the things that you just talked about. Now, most places you do have to pay fees for school fees because you either building a new school or you're supplementing a school. They have to add on, they have to provide more teachers, more equipment, because you're creating an impact there. There are the environmental mitigation issues. You're taking out an area that is habitat. You either have to leave it alone, or you have to go, as you said, find another place and create and invest in additional habitat for the environmental, whatever's going on there, and the cultural stuff. Now, I know obviously Great Britain has a very lengthy and rich history, and they would not want someone just tearing down a building that is historically significant just to put up a up. There would have to be some kind of mitigation measures there, and they have that here too. It's just I think a different idea of what historical is. The livability issues are there too. I find it interesting the 30% affordable housing is fairly uniform. There is affordable housing considerations in the U.S., but much higher in the more dense areas on the coast. And in the middle of the country, it's not much of a consideration. It's not a big issue. I find that a lot of the more middle of the country states are very, I would say, loose on a lot of these regulations. You can get through very quick, very minimal regulations. When you get to the coastal states, counties, and the closer to the water you are, the more stiff it gets. Because populated areas, it can be very, very strict and arduous to get through the processes. And it takes longer, it takes more money, it takes more patience, it takes a lot more consultants to find and get through it. So I find there's a lot of similarities, even though the countries obviously are different. There's a lot of similarities. I think the ideas are still there to protect the environment and mitigate the impact for existing residents when new residents come in. Now, one thing you mentioned was the developer pays for everything, not the homeowner. In the U.S., depending on where you are, the developer will pay a lot, but they also will pass a lot of costs on to the new residents. They have what they call mellow roofs or community facilities districts, where the developer paid a lot of developer fees, but there's additional things that they didn't want to add into the price of the house. So they become additional property taxes later for schools and for parks and for street lighting and those type of things. Okay. Now you said you mentioned that in some information you sent me that you're waiting on legislation about biodiversity.
Yeah.
And you said the uplift of 10%. So they have to replace what's equivalent to what they may have destroyed in their project plus 10%. Is that, how did they figure that out?
That's roughly correct. I mean, there's a biodiversity metric that you have to use. So there are special biodiversity consultants, ecologists that you can use to make that calculation. And I'm going to describe it as a bit of a dark art.
Okay.
It's not as simple as saying, well, I've lost 10 acres of biodiversity here, so I'm going to reprovide 10 acres somewhere else. Depending on exactly what you're going to do to the site, you might end up with a greater output on a smaller area of land that's being reprovided, depending on how you're going to use it, whether you're going to have a pond there or whether you're going to grow a particular type of grass. These are factors that are all taken into consideration by the ecologist to demonstrate, look, this is how much we're losing here, and this is how we're reproviding it, either on site, that there are landscaping opportunities on your development site, you can use those. And if that's not going to work, if that's not enough of an output, then you can look to third-party sites. So there are wildlife charities that are coming forward. There are estates that landowners who have a lot of land who are coming forward and saying, you can use our land to make that biodiversity provision. So we will take care of all of that for you, obviously for a price, and you have to maintain that biodiversity area for a period of about 30 years. So again, that's another cost for the developer to factor and take into account when he's pricing everything. And also, as you said, Steve, how it ultimately affects house prices. I mean, one thing I did want to mention was in terms of affordable housing in the UK, there continues to be a huge demand for housing, an even bigger demand for affordable housing. It's something we haven't yet solved. No matter in my years of practice, I've always heard of various white papers, various proposals, trying to tackle the issue of affordable housing. And the issue we have is that, in London and in the areas sort of immediately surrounding London, there's a huge demand for housing, and so that's proving to be a bit of a challenge.
The conundrum with affordable housing is, as you said, there's a huge demand for it and not a large supply, which in economics means it's not going to be affordable, right? If it's a huge demand and a short supply. And that's the conundrum for affordable housing. You want to make it affordable, but the fact is there's more that's wanted than there is available, which makes it less affordable. And so you have to do things like put rent caps and price caps and those kind of things on it. But that doesn't always solve the supply. It's really a supply issue is what it is.
I think it's a variety of different factors. It's not just about supply. It's also about how quickly or how slowly you can get through the planning process. So if you can't secure a planning permission from your local council and then you have to go to appeal, that appeal is going to add another year, possibly longer, onto your timetable. If at the end of that process you've got a local resident who's unhappy, or an environmental group that's unhappy that planning permission was granted, you might be looking at a legal challenge which will take another year to sort out. So but I think that the main concern that at the moment that people have is that local councils are under-resourced, and it's taking planning applications a long time to be looked at quickly.
All right, with that, we need to take another break. We're with Karen Full. She's a real estate attorney in the UK. I'm your host, Steve.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services, including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing, and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Real men of real estate.
Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA.
Notes, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station KCAA radio.com.
You can find us on your dial at 102.3 FM, 1050 AM, as well as 106.5 FM.
Hi, this is Jim McLaughlin with Effective Action Consulting, and I've been a member of Fire Up Connect for, probably 3 years now. And what I really like about Fire Up Connect is the unique model that we go through, that we follow, the agenda, so to speak, in the meeting, that really has us get engaged and involved with each other in the meetings. It's not that we're individuals, it's that we're all really working together to better ourselves, our businesses, and the community through the projects that we work on. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to network with people in this environment, and it's really impacted my business in a big way. So take a look.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are talking today about real estate in the UK and what that process looks like with Karen Full, who is an attorney. She's a partner with Farrar. Did I pronounce that right? Farrar and Company?
It's Farrar.
Farrar, okay. Farrar and Company. And they're based in London in the United Kingdom. And we've been talking in the last couple segments about some of what's similar and what's different between doing this process in the US and doing this in the UK. Now, for a lot of our listeners, even if you're in the US, and I'm mentioning things that we do in the United States, you may not even be familiar with our process. The process of what happens before you actually start building things is a little bit of a behind the curtain thing that most people don't get to see much of. Even experienced real estate people here in the US, when I talk to them, I find out they really don't know a lot about what happens before the houses are there, how they got there. So just to apprise our listeners, there is no place that I know of in the how would you say, the first world, I guess, where you just can take your piece of property and go put what you want on it and build it. That's not the way it works. You always have to, in even different countries and different jurisdictions, you usually have to go to some degree, get permission from your friends and neighbors to do what you want to do, even though it's your property. And there are definite reasons for that. And if you live somewhere, you would want to know what's going on next door to you or across the street, so it doesn't devalue or hurt your lifestyle. And that's why that process is there. So Karen, you do have clients that come over from the US from time to time. What do you do for them?
Well, I mean, typically the clients who are coming over from the US are investors. So they are interested in particular types of projects. So they might, I mean, I'm acting for a client that's building a movie studio. So there's always a huge demand from people like Netflix and Disney and what have you. And so there's a continuing demand for movie studio space. They may well be looking to acquire existing development because they just want to invest. They want to put their money somewhere where they know it's going to make a half decent rental return. So they might be buying up offices or industrial space or storage units and what have you. I've also helped clients, so US citizens who are living in England or in London and are doing much smaller projects. So trying to renovate their homes to make it suitable for family purposes. It may be a listed building, so that's a heritage building, and there are lots and lots of hoops to jump through when you're looking at grade 1 and grade 2 listed buildings, and they need a bit of hand holding and a bit of guidance to get them through that process, and then sometimes it will go to appeal as well. So it's a real mixed bag. It's not just the investors with millions of pounds to invest. It's also individuals who are just trying to make their home a decent home so it's suitable for family purposes.
So if you end up living in a place, how would I know if I'm living in a place and it was listed? Because it may have been listed before, 2 or 3 owners before I got there. How does it get listed, and how would I find out if my building is?
Well, it's listed by a government body called Historic England, and if your property is listed, there's a register at your local council where it's noted. And if you're a buyer, if you're buying a house, your attorney would carry out searches to see what's been noted against the property, and the listing would come up in that search. So before you bought it, provided you've got a decent attorney, that your attorney would have told you, yes, this is a listed building, so you need to be very careful about what you're doing to the property, and you're not carrying out works that needed consent, because if you do and you do it without consent, then that's a criminal offence. And then the other thing you need to think about if you're buying a listed building is, how do you know that the people that you're buying from, or the people who owned it before them, haven't carried out some illegal works? So you do need to do your due diligence and your checks, and we help clients through that process.
Now, the work that they are restricted, is it strictly the exterior of the building so it doesn't look different, or does it also affect the interior?
It affects, if your property is listed, I mean, most listings work in such a way that all of it is listed, so the outside and the inside. And this is where it gets a little bit difficult to interpret, because the legislation says if you're going to carry out works that are going to affect the special interest or character of that building, then those works need listed building consent. I I don't interpret the legislation for my clients. So I will then appoint a heritage consultant to say, look, these clients want to do these works. Can you at least advise us on whether you think it needs listed building consent? If they think it does, we'll go to the local authority and make an application. And that can take some time depending on the extent of the works.
Yeah, because buildings will always need things. Obviously, modernization, because anything that's listed, I'm assuming, was probably built before there was sanitary plumbing and maybe before there was electrical and communications. And you'd want to be able to use the building and make it functional, but at the same time not destroy its heritage, its historical significance. So, and then also there's buildings that, they get termite damage, they get dry rot damage, or whatever, and you have to fix them structurally, which is very, you've got to take the building apart to some degree to do that. But at the same time, you want to be able to put it back to what it looked like, I assume, make it original as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of councils, they'll have a designated heritage officer that will deal with these types of applications. And they're not looking to stop you from, ripping out modern fabric within a building that clearly has only been put there in the last 10 years and now needs to be replaced. And it's certainly not the intention that they want to stop you from making your building or your home habitable, because then we'd end up with nobody wanting to live in listed buildings and they fall into disrepair, which just doesn't make any sense. So we have to sort of move with the times, but it's just striking that balance between modernizing, making the building more energy efficient, but also protecting any special character or features that it has.
Yeah, and so here I've worked on a couple of buildings that they were historically significant buildings. And one of the first things we had to do was figure out which era are we restoring it to, because an old building has been remodeled multiple times over its history. And so you could have a building that you're taking it back to a remodel of what it looked like in the 1880s, but the building was built in the 1820s or something like that. And so you have to kind of figure, okay, which era we're restoring it to, what made it historically significant, because maybe what makes it historically significant was the use it was undergoing at some point that was well beyond when it was first built, and it had been fixed to some degree at that time. So sometimes there's that, and I don't know if that's a lot of what that Heritage Council gets into, but I remember going through that process with the building, and we actually came upon the determination, not we, but the historical experts that were working on it, to restore it to the 1920s version of what the building was, which was after electric had been installed into it, but before it had been modernized in the century, and there had been like 4 remodels after that. So it can get a little tricky working on it.
Yeah, you've got to do your research, and we have archivists and certainly the heritage teams that we work with know exactly where to go to find that historical information and the historical plans relating to the building, so that we can demonstrate to the council, well, look, this is what it actually was, and help. That normally helps to sort of guide them through the application process.
Right. So you've got multiple different kind of clients. What do you find the most interesting about them?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, you've got a lot of different types of clients you work with, a lot of different projects. What do you find to be the most interesting about the work you do?
I think for me it's the variety of clients that I work with. So yes, we work for major developers and landed estates that are doing very large projects, very interesting projects. But equally, we will have those single inquiries coming through where it's in relation to someone's home, it's in relation to a listed building, and then I also work on the other side for people or communities who feel that the development that's being planned close to them shouldn't be given planning permission, and that could end up in litigation. So that's quite interesting, looking at it from the other side of the fence, where you're scrutinizing the development and you're considering, well, is it too much for this area? Is it, does the mass or the scale need to be reduced? Does it need to provide more affordable housing? Could they do better with the landscaping? Is this actually the right location for that type of use, or is it better off being elsewhere? So that's also very interesting, because planning can get quite can be quite an emotional topic for residents who feel that the development isn't suited to their area. So that's a very, very different experience to working with a developer, an experienced, seasoned developer who knows exactly what he wants and has a very clear thing in mind in terms of the type of consent that they're looking for.
Great. With that, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll wrap this up. We're talking with Karen Full. She is an attorney in the UK specializing in real estate and land usage and getting approvals for people over there to get what they want done on their properties if it's allowed. I am your host, Steve Matley. This is Building Solid Foundations on KCAA, 1050 AM, all over Los Angeles, and on your streaming platforms on the Building Solid Foundations channel on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Android. We'll be right back after this.
Fire Up Connect is the most innovative business networking group, supporting and collaborating with a dozen of small businesses that are interested in building and establishing strong business connections, hosting educational live seminars while carrying out business and community-driven projects, as well as marketing programs as a part of its membership program. Fire Up Connect also offers virtual assistance with a wide range of services, including inbound customer support, chat support, appointment setting and email management, graphic designing, video editing, web design and development, social media marketing, e-commerce solution, content writing, and much more. For more information, head on over to www.fireupconnect.com. Fire Up Connect, helping success stories unfold every day.
Real men of real estate.
Men of Real Estate radio show here on KCAA.
Boats, mortgages can be purchased.
All of us want to live in thriving communities.
Basically, go to the radio station KCAA radio.com.
You can find us on your dial at 102.3 FM, 1050 AM, as well as 106.5 FM.
This is Steve Matley. Join me every Thursday at 3 p.m. right here on KCAA Solid Foundations Radio.
Hi, this is Jim McLaughlin with Effective Action Consulting, and I've been a member of Fire Up Connect for, probably 3 years now. And what I really like about Fire Up Connect is the unique model that we go through, that we follow, the agenda, so to speak, in the meeting that really has us get engaged and involved with each other in the meetings. It's not that we're individuals, it's that we're all really working together to better ourselves, our businesses, and the community through the projects that we work on. So I'm really grateful to have the opportunity to network with people in this environment, and it's really impacted my business in a big way. So take a look.
Welcome back to Building Solid Foundations. I'm your host, Steve Matley. We are talking real estate development and land use in the UK with Karen Full. She is a real estate attorney in the United Kingdom. The last segment, we were talking about what she found most interesting. One thing she mentioned was there's a little bit of emotion in this process. And I will tell you from my experience that here in the US, if I go to a planning commission meeting, nobody comes to the meeting that likes what we're doing. The only people that show up are the people that don't like what you're doing. And they are very emotional about it. So it's the nature of it. And of course, wherever you live, if a project comes up you don't like, you'll be at the planning commission meeting. If it's not, you'll probably stay home and think, well, good for them that they're doing that. So there is a lot of emotion in this. The other thing is some of this can be very subjective, trying to figure out how to make this work. So Karen, I want to swift over and talk about what's happening in the UK real estate market. Obviously, I know very little about the UK market, but you live there, you work there, it's your world. Tell us what's going on in the UK real estate wise.
Well, I mean, I think obviously the UK economy has suffered, and obviously that's had an impact on the property market, which for some for certain overseas investors, it's an opportunity, if prices are dropping. But I think the general feeling here is that we're through the worst of it now, and we should see an upturn in the market coming up over this year. So I think we're seeing in offices there's still a demand for office space, but it's a different type of demand. So we want high quality office spaces, particularly in demand, because obviously during the pandemic, a lot of people were working from home. And now that they're being encouraged to come back into the office, people are very interested in the type of space that they're coming back into. That they'll want a better quality environment, better quality space. We're all into hot desking now, so we need to make it an attractive building to get people back into the office. So there's certainly a continuing demand for office space as well, and storage and retail uses, especially retail storage, is another a sector that's continues to see a demand as well. I suppose that maybe that's because most of us are, or a lot of us are now shopping online, but we haven't seen, certainly the shopping centres that people are still continuing to visit. So there is still a demand for retail uses as well.
And I find when I was over there in December, I saw that there was a lot of commuters around. The tube was full of people, and it was work people. You could tell they were coming to and from work. Now, obviously, we were over there Christmas time, so there's probably some Christmas shoppers that coming down into the shopping centers and those things in central London. But there was a lot of people in those stations on a Friday evening in London trying to get back out, get out to the wider areas, which told me there was a very large population in London that was back at the office. The traffic told me that too, and it looks like most of the office buildings had lights on.
Yeah, absolutely. People want to be back in the office. There is a definite trend. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are the days when most people like to be back in the office. Mondays and Fridays are a bit quieter. Most people traveling into London will be traveling from outside London along rail networks or the tube line. We've had the Elizabeth line is now sort of fully open and functioning, so that's taken a lot of the strain or demand off other parts of the tube. So we are seeing people coming back into the office because I think people were slightly fed up of being at home for 2 years, working from home. But I think the tube network and the buses work in such a great way in London, and people are now using them, and we will continue to see further improvements. There's talk of another tube line coming forward in London. I expect it will take some time to actually come through, but we're always looking, certainly the mayor's always looking at making improvements to make sure that people still want to come into London, not only to come to work, but also to take advantage of shopping and entertainment as well.
Right. And being over there, I realized that you could live virtually anywhere in Greater London, and between the tube and the train network, you have a way to get in and out. You don't need a vehicle. I also learned that if you did have your own private vehicle, you would not want to in any way commute ever. It's quite arduous taking the above ground transportation on the streets. It takes a long time. And it's frustrating.
It does. I'm sure we'll pay an absolute fortune for parking. It's so much easier to just get on the tube.
Oh, just the time and the frustration of it it just doesn't move. But the tube was quick, easy, clean, safe. It was great. And of course, for the U.S. listeners, if you don't live in New York City or downtown San Francisco or Chicago or a place that has actually decent transit, Washington, D.C., most of the rest of the country does not enjoy that type of mass transit that actually is functional, quick, clean, safe, and gets you where you actually want to go. So it's a foreign concept for most of the U.S., which is why we're always in our cars and we build big freeways. I like the idea of being able to just walk 6 blocks to the station and jump on and get where you want to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I find it very easy. I mean, I live outside London. I'm a good 30 miles outside London, but it takes me 50 minutes to get to the office because I've got a tube line that takes me very close to where I need to be. And I can't imagine coming into London as much as I do without the tube.
Right. Yeah. When we were over there, we were with a group of people. And so a lot of the transportation was pre-organized, and it was in shuttle buses and those kind of things. And honestly, I would have much rather on my own taken a train or a tube, because it would take an hour and a half to go where you could go in 15 to 20 minutes on the tube. It was insane. But and London, made the decision to invest in that instead of freeways, unlike a lot of things here. So we're gonna have to wrap this discussion up. I want to thank Karen for being on the show today, sharing a little bit about the UK. It's been an education for me too. I'm always fascinated at how things work differently, especially in a sector that I work so deeply in the US, and learning a little about the UK world. So thank you for being on the show. We really appreciate the connection with you. And this is Building Solid Foundations Radio. We're on 1050 AM all over Southern California. If you miss us live, don't forget to catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire, or Android, or on one of the many podcast platforms where we are. I'm your host, Steve Matley. And until next week, go do something different.
We can't be everything to everyone, or can we?